we do have a couple. In fact, we have one that is probably my favorite that shows Maggie Wilson when she was in high school. We have a picture right next to it that shows her oldest son going to school as a child. And so those sorts of things I just find just intriguing and interesting and fun to look at. So those are the sort of things, again, then with the general store, I would like to show pictures of the various businesses that have been around. So, kind of the direction.
Does everybody know Deb? This is Deb Boyle.
Hi, Deb.
Yes.
And
Hi.
she has been doing the videography for me, and she's quite good. And
Were you born here in Kenai?
No,
Or until Donna?
we got here in '73.
Oh.
Oh, you're a newcomer.
I got
Yeah.
here in 73 too.
Newer
Officially.
older than I am.
her father-in-law wrote a book, and he's the guy that pretty much did most all the diving on all the platforms.
Oh.
Put them in, helped set up all those. Owen Boyle.
Did he know Jackson Ball?
So now,
I'm not sure.
Ask Dad then.
I'm sure.
Not this much
I'm
Boyle
sure.
City.
I think he might be mentioned in the
Matt
book.
Boyle
It's a
and Dave.
it's a good book. It's
Okay.
easy to read really fast.
I didn't realize.
And
they were so
they're
famous.
the musicians that are pretty
Yeah.
prolific.
And I don't know who these ladies
And Phil, the other lady?
Hi, I'm Kathleen McLeod.
Oh,
Hi,
okay.
Kathleen.
Okay.
I didn't see you come in.
Oh, she slipped in there.
She's
didn't
the
she?
one that I was wanting to come and let her see how interview processes occur, in hopes that she might want to get involved.
she's
and
another
start doing
newcomer.
some of these.
Well, if we use your family as the litmus test, we're all newcomers.
Yeah, really.
And I'm Chris. I'm his middle sister.
Okay.
I'm the middle Morin. Middle
Okay.
of five. The middle Morin, yeah.
I don't know if you guys know, but when we have the telephone office down behind American Legion, is that what that building is down here?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
They took down the building, but just last year the outhouse fell over. The outhouse has been sitting there all these years, and last year when I drove around there, it had fallen over, and they still hadn't moved it.
Yeah, it could be good.
They always built the most important buildings the best.
I thought
I
that was
remember those details.
And what was your name?
Sharon.
Sharon.
Uh-huh.
And how? What?
I am the secretary with the Kenai Historical Society.
Okay.
So one of the, this kind of goes back to it, one of my intentions was to create a lobby that would address, at least as far as ballot's concerned, either the main characters, which of course Gert is the character that is Bertha, she's the taxi cab driver, and also references to time periods. So Joe's, I want Joe's to have a section. Everybody thinks Joe's is just the bar at the end of the road, and I realized that back in the day, both Joe's and Larry's Club was a gathering spot, not just for drinking and partying, but kind of where a lot of stuff got communicated and
The town hall.
a little bit, yeah, and
Right
all
across
sorts
from
of
the town
things.
hall, yes, for sure.
We've had some stories about Edie's, thanks to Donis. In one of the scenes, there's a little bit of a jab at the politics of the city, which is very amusing. And it references, oh, we need marshals and we need law enforcement. Well, the issue was on several occasions, and in fact, at Joe's there was going to be a lynching, and somebody thought somebody stole or sunk a skiff, and George Robinson stepped in with his 12 gauge and said, fellas, that ain't happening. So there's a rowdy thing, but at Edie's, she shared with us that there was no, Stan was a commissioner, so he's the only official government guy. Got a call, come over to Edie's, somebody got killed. So he calls up Donis, this is Donis's story, I'm paraphrasing her story, and she carried her typewriter, that's about a 50-pound piece of steel, and gets over there, and what had happened is some fellows were hunting, bow hunting, and were changing the jukebox selections from across the room with their arrows, And I guess the young feller didn't get the memo and stepped right in front of him, and he got dead. And so you try to explain that to, I mean, even us are going, okay. But down there, they, oh, that never happened. So, well, yeah, it kind of did. Honest doesn't really exaggerate. So these are stories that are kind of fun to learn and share, and so this is kind of our goal, and this is Margaret.
I know a lot of you. Are you a lot of you?
O'Reilly.
Look for O'Reilly Gilman.
Gilman, and she's actually playing Gert. So
Oh,
I
you
thought it would be, I'm trying to get my cast
That's her.
to kind of
Ah.
understand and get a sense of
What a
who
pretty
they're
lady.
representing, and maybe that'll come out a little bit.
And tell me your name again.
I'm Jack Porter.
Jack Porter.
That's my
Okay.
sister Annie, my sister BK, my
And
wife
you're-
Bonnie at the end.
Okay, and you're Colleen's.
Sister.
Colleen's, yes, that's
wait,
another
Colleen's
one
a
of our
sister,
sisters.
too.
Wait, Colleen Whitburn
Oh, that's my
No,
daughter.
is your daughter.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And this is our youngest brother's daughter, Diane.
Okay. Gotcha.
Otherwise known as Diney.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call her Diney.
She knows me as Emily and Jasmine and Bella's mom. That's
Well-
I have no other identity at the school.
Because I counted, I think, Colleen put together a list, or sorry, the principal at McKissick
Buffy.
North Star. Buffy, excuse me. And I think there are 10 Porter great-grandchildren at McKissick
Only
North Star.
10?
There's more
10
than
or
that. I bet you there's more than that.
For real? There probably is.
Well, I'll have you
At the
cross-check
elementary?
that. Just at my school, just at North Star.
Hmm.
McKissick North Star.
Yeah, there's at least that many. We'll have to think about it.
Yeah.
And by the by, if you didn't know, Eli got a cow down in Homer today,
Oh,
or
right.
yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
That's so funny. I
thought
remember
I teach with
all
Eli,
the
so
fake
it's kinda
fruit
cool.
Okay, yeah.
stuff. That used to be,
Of course.
that was like my
Of course,
mom's thing.
That was the thing.
That was
Well, he
the
didn't
thing.
make the meeting
The
yesterday.
cornucopia stuff and the bowl and that. So was this Christmas or
And
Thanksgiving
Abe
or
was
something?
down in
Do
Port
you remember when
in
that was?
Homer
Yeah.
too.
I'm not sure it's at Antwerp.
Oh,
For
Abe.
some reason.
So-
Well, he'd
Trained.
gone down for the day. I don't know
Well,
what.
there's a
It's
big
my
rest.
grandmother.
Mhm.
He's wrestling. Oh, yeah, he's wrestling.
And
coach
Coley was down there.
for wrestling.
I think probably.
Big son Coley.
So, do you conduct, when you're videotaping, do you conduct an interview?
I usually just ask and explain that it's in context of the ballad of Kenai, and as an example, one of the things is the cab company. So could you? And then I just ask, what can you tell us about the cab company?
The cab company was, the road to Kenai actually opened in the fall of 1951. So in the spring of 1952, we moved down. Dad came down with a partner with 3 cars, 3 red Buicks, and started Red's Cab, because with the road just opening, how many cars would have been here ahead of time, and people needed transportation. So that started the cab company.
And your dad's name was
Morris Porter,
Morris Porter.
otherwise known as Maury.
How you knew that?
With my mother,
You gotta do it for the
The
camera.
camera.
with my mother Bertha, and with a partner, which was Chuck Brady, and his wife name
Kitty.
was Kitty.
Not that kid.
Full circle.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Then, as Amy explained a little while ago, it's pretty hard to call a cab when there's no telephones, so they started putting telephones actually into our, we were staying at first above the old territorial school in the old teachers' place there, and he put in old Army field phones that were called EE8s. And he put those in at the businesses, and if somebody wanted a cab, they could crank that phone and we could answer it at the house. And then when Mom and Dad or whoever was driving came back, we could tell them where the next fare was. They also met the planes at the airport and picked up fares there.
Now the airport
Let's see.
was overboard the cleaners. That was where they landed, or I mean that was the.
So where they came in
Yeah,
over the
behind
road.
where the cleaners is, I think the building is still there that it used to be. And the lady that was known as Miss PNA, Mrs. PNA, or whichever you want to call her, is still available, I'm sure, for comment at this time. Last time I
We've
talked to her,
interviewed-
she was
we've
still
had-
as sharp as a tack.
If
So
he
sharp
is,
as a
yes.
tack.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Joanna Hollier.
Oh,
Hollier.
She was,
she ran the airport?
she was, well, she worked for PNA, which
She
is.
was, yeah, she
So,
was the employee.
for us, she was PNA, and that was all there was at the airport was PNA, so basically, yes, I guess she ran it.
So what year did they put in the army base at Wildwood?
That was started also, I believe, in 1952, right,
Can't
Amy?
tell you.
I think construction started in 52 and was completed about 54.
Yeah.
So the road was,
Well, I
Part of
don't
that
know how
probably.
far was the road. Was there a road all the way out to
No.
Wildwood at that time?
Well, it might have gone to Wildwood.
I think it did go to Wildwood, because when Dad and Mom were driving a cab, they did do some fairs to Wildwood.
Was Edie's out there past Wildwood at that time?
As far as I know, now, I was only 5 years old.
Right. Okay.
I thought Wildwood was an Air Force base.
It was,
Paid
but
one.
first it was an Army base, and then an Air Force base, and then it was given to the natives.
The
and,
natives.
yeah.
So when you say the telephone line, it physically was from in town, and I just remember stories from Gene McMaster telling us that Bertha and Maury Porter strung that line virtually on spruce trees,
Yes.
Some of
right
it.
down the road.
We not only,
That's just kinda-
I helped with stringing telephone lines when I was younger, and we strung them on trees not only from here to Wildwood, we strung them on trees out to, later to Soldotna to give them a telephone.
Wow,
And every spring, we would put a new line in down to the cannery
yeah,
so that they would have a telephone, and we strung that through the woods. Dad and Mom eventually got the right-of-way for putting in utility right-of-way on the highway going out to Wildwood. And they had it strung on trees. Now later, when the Army moved in, the commander there at Wildwood asked permission to put in some Army wires on our right-of-way, and said they would put in regular telephone poles so we could put our wires on those poles. Mom said, okay, go ahead and do it, so they did. They put in real telephone poles, and then there was a change of commander at Wildwood, and when he showed up, Mom's coming to town one day. By that time, we lived on the homestead. She was coming to town, and there were GIs on those poles cutting our wires off. So Mom went to the base and said, you guys are taking our wires off the poles, what's the deal? And they said, well, Army regulations, we cannot allow civilian wires on military poles. She said, fine, get your military poles off of my right-of-way. Next day, they were out putting the wires back up for us.
that's right, those are the stories.
you didn't mess with her, huh?
No, you didn't mess much with Mom. I'll tell you what, when I was a kid in school, I can remember we were in the old school here, and you could see the road from the classroom I was in. And I can remember sitting there one day, and one of the kids says, here comes fun, I see Jack's mom coming.
At some point then, we hooked in with the military base in White Alice so that we could call worldwide. One of my very first long-distance calls when I was an operator for Mom and Dad was to place a call for Mrs. Archer at the Archer's Grocery to her mother in London, and to hear it go from here to Seattle to Chicago to New York and then transatlantic
That's amazing.
to London.
And you had to hear each step along the
And
way
you had to hear
back.
it, and when it went transatlantic, it was just a huge echo. And then London. I was so excited.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you did the first overseas call ever from Kenai, right? That was
I
it.
don't know if it was the first. It was my first.
And then Jeannie took over the long distance.
Later,
That's
much
much
later,
later.
much
That's
later.
much later.
Jeannie
Mrs.
McMaster.
Curtis
Master,
did too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause she had a bird that could talk, and you'd go in there and go, hello, hello, can I help you?
I know. Yeah.
Is Jeannie represented in the play?
No.
She's not?
She choreographed the first play.
She was such a character. I mean, I just picture her with her long
Yes.
cigarette and
And her
Oh,
long
I love her.
braid and.
While
yeah.
teaching dance class. That's
oh, believe me, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did many dance classes with her.
So what we have tried to do is use some of her dance vocabulary, you know, that pretty classic. We have tertiates in there. Not necessarily a Denina move, but we're blending and integrating and trying to incorporate some of the old with the new, so that we keep some traditions and you know, again, honoring our elders.
Cool.
So that's it. Now I did hear a story, and did your mom then string, or you guys string, a telephone line when you said you got out to the homestead? There was a cat trail at the very least. I remember it sort of, because we stayed at our Ness's homestead on Upper Salamantha for a summer and a winter and a summer, I think. Well, our house was being built in 62 or 3.
64.
So,
There was a road that was like a Jeep road
right.
out there.
Thus breakup, meaning the road didn't survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Even when they got the road, it almost
Wasn't
didn't.
right.
Yeah, it went out in front of Edie's just about every spring during breakup that went out. And I can remember when you went there, you drove your car sometimes to the mud hole, parked it, and walked across and took whatever car was on the other side. You knew who they were. You knew
Right,
whose car you were
right.
driving. And you drove it, and when you came back, then you parked their car and went and got, because you couldn't get through the mud hole for a few days.
Right. Now, did your ma string a phone line out to the house?
To our house?
Yeah.
Eventually, but not just to our house. Eventually, there were telephones put in out there. It was all party lines.
I was just gonna say,
Oh,
party
yeah,
on, you
I
could,
remember
you
the
could
party
hear
line.
people talking.
Yeah.
In those days, your telephone number was like 2 longs and a short, or two shorts and a long, or 3 longs. And that was it. Everybody's phone rang when you cranked it. So
Well, Jean always had us younger dancers, mostly the girls, but sometimes us boys plugging in. May I help
Oh,
you?
yeah.
Hello, that's the name, right number.
somewhere we've got
She had a little card you had to read.
somewhere
Thank
we've
you.
got a picture of that old switchboard.
Yeah. And I remember you could hear everybody talking. It was like, oh, that's why some people knew more than others about what's
Well,
going
you
on
know,
in town.
With that kind of a system where you have 2 longs and a short, after a while you get to where you got no more codes to give out. So I can remember they divided the town in 2, so that 2 longs and a short was somebody over here, 2 longs and a short was also somebody over here, so that we would have. It didn't last for very long, but there for a short time, if somebody on this side of town wanted to call somebody on this side of town, they would call our house. And we would throw a big knife switch, connect the 2 sides together, and then we would have to listen to find out when the conversation ended so that we could open the knife switch. That didn't last too long before Dad actually went and got a switchboard. I believe it came from Homer.
When we had the switchboard, there was a place to run the fire siren for the whole town. And then all of the people who were interested in where the fire was, all their flaps would come down on the switchboard, and you could plug in and tell everybody at once.
Oh, very good.
Because everybody was a fireman, basically.
So you guys fished. How long have you guys been fishing? Did your dad start fishing since you got here or before?
My
Was it?
dad fished for the Army first.
During
in the
World War II,
40s.
Okay.
he
Was that
He
fish
bought
trapping
fish. He
or?
bought fish from traps and
and beach fishing.
delivered them to the Army in Anchorage. They approached him because Mom and Dad had a little grocery store in Gamble, and they said, "We need fish." I had all these soldiers coming in, putting them in tents. I need to feed them. Can you get me fish? And my dad was always, "Of course I can." Watch me. So he got a boat and started buying the fish. Mom was still running the grocery store at that time. So
He was coming down here and getting it from the canneries or directly buying as a?
mostly direct
or-
buy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, direct buy from the fishermen.
And that trip from here with the fish to Anchorage was how many hours on a dirt road over the
Well,
mountains?
on the boat.
Oh, it was on the
But those
boat.
were
Even
double-
during World War II, there
double-ended.
was no road.
There
No,
was
Bristol.
it
no
wasn't a double ender. But he ran it up to Point Possession and waited for the tide
Yes, yes, you would.
to bring it on into Anchorage. But he went from that to when they started drifting. He was one of the first boats out there.
Well, when he started drifting later, was there was a guy by the name of Squeaky Anderson. You may have heard of him.
Yep.
So there'll be
Okay, Squeaky, Dad was thinking about going into fish processing at one time, but Squeaky beat him to it. Squeaky had more backing than Dad did. So Dad kind of worked with Squeaky for a while, and he was running kind of like tender for Squeaky a little bit, and he was running the inlet a lot, and he was telling Squeaky, he said, I see a lot of fish jumping out there in the middle. And Squeaky says, well, why don't you throw a shackle of gear on board, and when you're out there, see what kind of fishing there is. And that basically, to my understanding, was kind of the beginning of drifting on the inlet.
I don't remember when they opened it up, but when they opened it up for to actually commercially drift, then he and Billy Peterkin and a few others were some of the first ones out there to do it.
Now, was that limited, that was not limited entry at the time, was it?
No,
But they had outlawed fish traps at statehood?
at statehood.
At statehood, it took a while for them to be gone, but yeah.
When I was young, and I deckhanded for my dad some, I think we all did at one time or another, but I deckhanded for my dad some, and fishing opened at 9 o'clock Monday morning and closed at 9 o'clock Friday night.
Right.
So you were on the boat, you lived on the boat, because then after you delivered the fish Friday, then you spent the time cleaning the boat and getting ready to go back out again Monday. So it was a full-time on the boat, but they lived on the boat during the whole season.
And what boat was popular then if it wasn't the double ender?
Here on the, anything
Was
that
that
would
the snug,
float.
Anything
the
on
snug
float.
days or?
Dad one
All
year
kinds.
fished it was about a 28-foot, I think, open plank dory because he didn't have a boat. He fished his own boat, he fished the Gypsy, I think, before it burned. And then he fished a dory, he fished a company boat a couple of years. Then he had
Now,
the
were we
Annie-
hand hauling? Were you hand hauling that, or did you have hydraulics or
No, we had,
spools or?
what we had, there was a boat that he
windlasses
bought
of some sort?
that he named after my sister. He named it the Amy Joe, and that was the one that I deckhanded on. It was a 40-foot boat, and in the back was a big turntable that would actually turn on the boat, okay? And on that was set the reel, and Dad took a little gasoline engine, little, I think it was like a one-horse,
Yep.
that he ran through an old truck transmission to the reel. He could control the speed by shifting gears on that transmission. My job at that time was, there was a little clutch on that engine, sat on the outside of that turntable, and put the thing in gear, and when the fish would come up, because he wanted to pick it, then my job was to take it out of gear until he got it picked and wanted to throw it back in gear. And many times, I'd be sitting on that turntable out there and about half asleep. And when I was, I'd be sitting there and I had my hand over across the engine to work that clutch. And if I fell asleep a little bit, my arm would fall on that spark plug and it'd wake me right back up.
I remember as I got older, hearing that Dad was always in the top 10 fishing boats, and then I heard that there were a certain number of people that would follow him
Oh, yeah.
because he knew where the